What's up, everybody? Today I want to tell you about a tool that pretty much any electrician would count as an essential part of his or her kit. Lineman's pliers, also known as electrician's pliers. They're pretty much the do-everything tool of the electrical world. Everything from cutting heavy gauge wire to gripping and pulling wire with these pretty aggressive crosshatch teeth. There's a crimper on the back as well as another set of gripping jaws, and they've even got enough weight to be used as an improvised hammer. A lot of times you'll see them used in conjunction with a flat blade screwdriver to punch a knockout in a box or to tighten or loosen a Romex connection. So let's go line by line, feature by feature, and see what's so good about these pliers and what some different uses might be. Starting at the top, we see the pretty heavy, pretty wide jaws. You can get a decent enough purchase on a nut with these if you need to loosen a small nut and you don't have anything else handy, you don't have the exact wrench or nut driver handy and you're up on a ladder. These can be used for that, or to hold that nut while you tighten the machine screw down. To get a good bite on a wire nut. Say you've got that wire nut jam-packed full with about all it can hold and you want to just make sure it's tightened that last little bit so it's not going to back out. These are the tool for the job. There's other uses, I'm sure, for the gripping teeth, but we'll move on to the cutting jaws. These will cut, I know they'll cut up to 10 gauge, or rather 10-3 wire. They'll, I'm sure, go much more than that. They've got a cutout, a recess on the back, so that makes it pretty convenient. The jaws, the cutting jaws, come completely together. There's actually, I don't know if you can see it on the camera there, there's actually a little bit of space, a small gap between the gripping teeth. That's something that when I first bought them I thought, man, this doesn't seem quite right, but it really doesn't seem to affect the usability of these unless you're working with super fine wire, which you probably wouldn't be if you're using these. That 16th or 32nd inch of a gap there is not a problem, and it allows the cutting jaws to come completely together. The jaws, there are different versions rated for different strengths. I believe these are rated to cut nails. Some wire cutters are just made for soft aluminum or copper and you can chip them. I've chipped some lightweight side cutters by trying to cut nails or screws with them. I believe these are rated for heavier duty use. Moving down from there, the pivot of course here is nice and tight and smooth, and it doesn't have any play in it, no wobble. It is just stiff enough that it doesn't fall open. I also have only had these for a couple years. Some pliers that I see in some tool bags of some older professionals will fall open pretty easily, but it's still a pretty tight action. Moving on down to the crimper. This is one of my favorite features of this tool. Well, the whole thing is pretty cool, but this is a pretty handy feature. So Klein says you can only use these, or should only use these, to crimp non-insulated terminals. I use them on insulated terminals all the time and have never had a problem. So the way you do that, you just, well, of course, stick your wire in your stranded wire in your terminal, and then seat that right in the pliers there and focus and just crimp down. Now you kind of see what happened there. Let's take a look at that a little bit more. So that terminal starts out as more or less round with your wire, your stranded wire should be running into it. And as you crimp that, that actually folds the mouth of that terminal, the two sides of that crimp, together and in. And that's going to create a situation where there's a lot of surface contact with that stranded wire, and it's going to be a lot less likely to back out, impossible to back off, as opposed to just using a flat crimp. Some people will take a pair of pliers, or if all they have is just a cheap pair of pliers, and they'll just stick that terminal in there and just pinch it flat. Well, it's not really the most effective crimp. You end up with less surface contact to the wire, and there was no fold in the metal. Every time you put a bend in metal, it increases the strength in some dimension. Well, maybe not every time, most times. So this is a case where as we bent that crimp on around, that actually strengthens that crimp. Well, enough about crimps, you get the idea. There's also, let's get rid of that terminal, there's also another set of jaws on the back, which can be handy. Say there's a nail I need to pull, I can grip on that. Let me find a screw to demonstrate. I can, say there's a screw sticking out of a piece of wood, I can grab onto it there and then pivot here to pull it up out. I don't find a ton of uses for those gripping jaws, but they can be handy from time to time. So if you see any amount of electrical work in your future, pick up a set of these. This would be probably one of a dozen pair of tools, kinds of tools that could be counted as, you know, an essential 10 or 12 kit. When you're buying these, don't go cheap. These are a pair of Kleins. Channel Lock and Knipex also make a good brand, also make a good plier. So Klein certainly isn't the only one, but they're kind of a brand that I tend to gravitate towards. I got a pair of just real cheap ones as a teenager and have kept them around, and I use them, you know, just here in the shop when I'm just tinkering around, and they almost can't even compare on the same level. They almost can't even be called Lineman's pliers. The action is wobbly, the jaws can't cut very heavy wire, the teeth on the gripping part of the jaws isn't very effective, and it's just a straight cut, and so it has a lot less gripping power. There's just a flat jaw on the back, there's no crimper. For 30 or 35 bucks, spend the money and get a good pair. If you're gonna have them for a lifetime, you can't go wrong buying quality on some, well, pretty much anything, but especially like this. Buy the good ones. If you get on Klein's website or on Amazon, you're gonna find several different varieties. They're gonna have a kind with a fish tape puller, where built in to the bypass of these jaws, they're gonna be designed to grab the fish tape in the jaws and then run it back along the side of the pivot. And so you can pretty much run that fish tape parallel and not have to grip onto it at an angle to pull. I don't do much work, or really any work, in conduit, and so I'm not really using fish tapes, well, ever, so that wasn't really useful for me. They do make some specialty varieties that have 14 or 10 or 12 gauge strip selections on here. They can be handy. I opted not to go for that, but those are some options you have. They also make an Ironworker series, which has no insulated handles. They also make a variety that has specifically insulated handles. These rubber dipped grip handles do provide a certain level of insulation. The downfall of that is if they do get a nick in them that goes the whole way to the metal handle, if you're working with higher voltage, that current can actually go through that crack, through that slice, and get to you. So these are not marketed as insulated handles, insulated grips, just because it doesn't have that extra layer of protection. The ones with insulated handles have several layers of rubber and then a base layer of a different color, so you can see if it gets nicked and replace the pliers. To wrap it all up, if you don't have a pair of these and you're doing any amount of electrical work, get a pair. You won't be disappointed. Comment below and let us know what your favorite tools are when it comes to house repair and maintenance. We'll see you next time.